My name is Noah Carter, and this happened in October 2022. For years, I convinced myself that my family was just complicated. Everyone has secrets. Everyone has arguments. That's what I believed. Until the night I visited my grandfather without telling anyone. Looking back now, I wish I had listened to my mother. Or maybe, I wish I had never listened to her at all. My grandfather, Henry Carter, lived alone in a tiny farmhouse just outside Ash Hollow, Maine. It sat at the end of Hollow Creek Road, surrounded by miles of pine forest. The nearest neighbor was almost 2 miles away. When I was a kid, I spent every summer there, fishing in the creek, building tree houses, listening to Grandpa's impossible stories about the woods. Then one day, my mother packed our things. She looked Grandpa straight in the eyes and said, "You'll never see us again." I was 12 years old. Nobody explained why. Every time I asked about Grandpa afterward, Mom immediately changed the subject. If I pushed too hard, she became angry. Really angry. So eventually, I stopped asking. Years passed. College, a job in Boston. Life moved on. Until one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. When I answered, an elderly woman's voice spoke softly. "Is this Noah Carter?" "Yes. I'm calling from Ash Hollow." My heart skipped. "My name is Eleanor Brooks, your grandfather's neighbor." I sat up in my chair. "Henry isn't doing very well. He's been acting." She hesitated, frightened. "Frightened of what?" I asked. There was a long silence. I don't think that's something I should explain over the phone. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "If you're going to see him, don't wait too long." The call ended. I stared at my phone for several minutes. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. I didn't tell my mother. If she knew where I was going, she would stop me. I packed a small overnight bag, climbed into my car, and started the long drive north. 5 hours later, darkness had swallowed the highway. Rain hammered against my windshield. My GPS suddenly lost signal. Then my phone did too. No bars, no internet, nothing. It felt as though the rest of the world had simply disappeared behind me. Around 9:30 that night, I turned onto Hollow Creek Road. Nothing had changed. Towering pine trees lined both sides like silent guards. Their branches swayed in the storm, scraping together with eerie whispers. At the very end of the road stood Grandpa's farmhouse. One lonely light glowed inside. Everything else was swallowed by darkness. I parked beside the weathered barn. The air smelled of wet pine, cold earth, and old wood. For a moment, I almost drove away. Something deep inside me whispered, "Leave." I ignored it. The porch creaked beneath my boots as I walked to the front door. I knocked once. Nothing. I knocked again. Still nothing. As I lifted my hand for a third knock, the door slowly opened. Grandpa stood there. At first, I barely recognized him. His hair had turned completely white. His face looked thinner than I remembered. But it wasn't his age that shocked me. It was his eyes. He looked absolutely terrified. Not surprised. Not happy. Terrified. Without saying a word, he grabbed my arm. His fingers were ice cold. He pulled me inside and slammed the door shut. One lock clicked. Then another. Then he fastened a heavy iron chain across the door. Only after peering through the window into the darkness did he finally turn toward me. His voice was barely louder than a whisper. "Noah, you shouldn't have come." I forced a nervous smile. "I wanted to surprise you." He didn't smile back. Instead, he asked a question that instantly made my stomach tighten. "Did anyone see you?" "What? When you left Boston? When you stopped for gas? When you drove here? Did anyone follow you?" I frowned. "No, at least, I don't think so." He closed his eyes in relief, only for a second. Then the fear returned, even stronger than before. He leaned closer. "You didn't tell your mother?" I shook my head. "No," he slowly exhaled. "Good." Then he looked me directly in the eyes. "Because if she finds out you're here, we won't survive the night." For several seconds, I couldn't speak. I waited for him to smile, to laugh, to admit it was some strange joke. He never did. Instead, he walked toward the kitchen and motioned for me to follow. The room looked almost exactly as I remembered. The old wooden table, the faded wallpaper, the cast iron stove. But now, something felt terribly wrong. Every window had thick wooden boards nailed across it from the inside. 3 wooden crosses hung above every doorway. Lines of salt covered each windowsill. Then I noticed something even stranger. Every clock in the farmhouse had stopped. Each one showed exactly the same time. 10:17 p.m. Grandpa saw me staring. "You noticed?" I nodded. "Why are all the clocks stopped?" "They aren't broken." His voice was quiet. I stopped them. "Why?" He didn't answer. Instead, he opened a kitchen drawer. Inside lay an old hunting revolver. He opened the cylinder, loaded. He placed it gently on the table. I never thought I'd have to use this again. I stared at the gun. "Grandpa, what exactly are you afraid of?" He looked straight into my eyes. "Your mother," I blinked. "My mother?" "Yes." I laughed nervously. "My mom teaches English at a high school. She volunteers at animal shelters. She sends me birthday cards every year." Grandpa didn't react. "That woman isn't the one who raised you." The room suddenly felt colder. "What are you talking about?" Instead of answering, he asked another question. "Noah, when was the last time you saw your mother asleep?" I frowned. "What?" "Think carefully." I searched my memory. Christmas, Thanksgiving, family visits, weekend dinners. She was always awake, always reading, always cleaning, always making coffee, always waiting. I couldn't remember seeing her asleep. Not once. Grandpa noticed the realization spreading across my face. "Exactly," I swallowed. "That's impossible. Everyone sleeps." He nodded slowly. "They're supposed to." Before I could ask what he meant, bang! Something slammed against the front door. Both of us froze. Another crash, even harder. Then came 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Grandpa's face turned pale. He whispered, "She's early." My heart pounded. "Who's early?" He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed my shoulder. "You have 30 seconds. He pointed toward the staircase. "The attic. Go." "What? Now?" "I'm not hiding from my own." He squeezed my arm hard enough to hurt. "Noah, for once in your life, trust me." The knocking stopped. Silence filled the house. Then, a woman's voice drifted through the front door. Soft, warm, comforting. "Noah?" It was my mother's voice. Perfect. Every syllable, every inflection. I instinctively stepped toward the door. Grandpa caught my jacket before I could move. "Don't." "But that's Mom." His voice cracked. "No, that's something pretending to be your mother." Outside, the woman laughed gently. "Noah, honey, I know you're inside. You don't have to hide from me." My pulse thundered in my ears. This couldn't be real. Maybe Grandpa was sick. Maybe he was imagining everything. Then the voice spoke again. "I baked your favorite apple pie, just like when you were little. Only 3 people knew apple pie had been my favorite. My mother, my grandfather, and me. Grandpa leaned close enough for only me to hear. It knows your memories. It knows everything she knew, but it isn't her." Outside, one final knock echoed through the house. Then the voice whispered, "You have 10 seconds before I come inside." Grandpa's eyes widened. They've never said that before. "What do you mean?" "They've never been able to enter." The old doorknob slowly turned. Once. Twice. Then the heavy chain lock began rattling violently. Grandpa picked up the revolver. For the first time in my life, I realized he wasn't trying to protect himself. He was trying to protect me. And whatever stood on the door, it wasn't waiting for permission anymore. The chain snapped, writing. The broken chain crashed onto the hardwood floor. For a single heartbeat, no one moved. The wind roared through the open doorway, carrying cold rain into the farmhouse. The old curtains fluttered wildly, and the porch light flickered, as though something outside was draining the electricity from the house itself. Henry Carter didn't hesitate. "Upstairs!" he shouted. Instead of running, I froze. Standing in the doorway was my mother. Or at least, she looked exactly like my mother. She wore the same yellow raincoat she'd owned for years. Her dark hair rested neatly on her shoulders despite the pounding rain. Not a single strand was wet. She smiled. It was the same smile I'd seen every birthday, every Christmas, every family dinner, yet something about it felt wrong. It lasted too long. "Noah," she said gently, "there you are. You left without telling me." I swallowed hard. "Mom?" Henry stepped directly between us. "Don't answer." She looked past him as if he weren't even standing there. "I've been worried about you," she continued softly. "You drove all this way by yourself. You must be exhausted." Her voice sounded perfectly normal, comforting, familiar. Every instinct told me to walk toward her. Henry whispered without taking his eyes off her. "Listen carefully. No matter what it says, do not believe it." My mother sighed. "Henry, you've been filling his head with stories again? I told you years ago to let this end." Henry slowly raised the revolver. "I made a promise, and I intend to keep it." The thing wearing my mother's face tilted its head. "You always were stubborn." Another cold gust swept through the doorway. The temperature inside the farmhouse dropped so suddenly that I could see my own breath. Henry spoke quietly. "Noah, I'm going to tell you 3 rules. You must remember every word. If you forget even one—" His voice faltered. "You'll die." I stared at him in disbelief. He continued anyway. "Rule 1. If it calls your name after midnight, don't answer. Even if it sounds exactly like someone you love. Especially if it sounds like someone you love." Outside, my mother's smile widened. "You're frightening him." Henry ignored her. "Rule 2. If every sound outside suddenly stops, the birds, the insects, the wind, everything, close your eyes and don't open them until you hear normal sounds again." I frowned. "Why?" His jaw tightened. "Because if you look, it will know you've seen its real face." A silence settled over the room. Then every sound vanished. The rain stopped, the wind disappeared, even the creaking of the old farmhouse ended. The silence was so complete that I could hear my own heartbeat. Henry's eyes widened. "Close them." I obeyed instantly. Darkness. Nothing but darkness behind my eyelids. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, careful. Walking across the living room floor. Not one pair. Several, bare feet, moving around us, circling us. I felt icy air brush across my face. Something stopped inches from me. I could feel it breathing. Except, it wasn't breathing. It was making a strange clicking noise, like fingernails tapping together. My entire body shook. Then I heard my mother's voice directly beside my ear. "Noah, you've grown so much." Her whisper was impossibly close. I clenched my fists and kept my eyes shut. Several endless seconds passed. Then, as suddenly as it had vanished, the storm returned. Rain pounded against the roof. Wind rattled the windows. Somewhere outside, an owl called. Henry finally spoke. "You can look now." I opened my eyes. The doorway was empty. My mother was gone. I looked outside. Only darkness remained. "What?" My voice barely worked. "What was that?" Henry slowly lowered the revolver. "It wanted you to look." It almost succeeded. I struggled to steady my breathing. "You mean that wasn't Mom?" "No." "When did—" I couldn't even finish the question. Henry looked toward the rain-soaked forest. "It happened 14 years ago. The woman who raised you disappeared. What came back wasn't human." The words hit me like a punch. "No, that's impossible. I've lived with her. I've had dinner with her. I've celebrated birthdays with her." Henry nodded sadly. "I know. It learns. It watches. It copies. And eventually, it becomes almost perfect." I backed away until I hit the kitchen counter. "No, this doesn't make any sense." Henry looked exhausted. "I pray every day that none of this ever has to make sense to you." Before I could answer, a loud knock echoed from somewhere above us. 3 slow knocks from the attic. My blood turned cold. Henry's face drained of color. "No," he whispered. "It found another way." The knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. This time something scraped slowly across the ceiling, long, heavy, as though someone were crawling just above the wooden boards. I looked upward. "There's someone up there." Henry grabbed my arm. "No, there shouldn't be." His eyes fixed on the attic hatch. I checked it before sunset. It was empty. The scraping stopped. Silence returned. Then a child's voice drifted through the ceiling. Soft, tearful. "Grandpa." I felt Henry stiffen beside me. The color vanished from his face. He whispered one word. "Emily." "Who's Emily?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, tears filled his eyes. The child cried again. "Grandpa, I'm cold. Please let me in." Henry slowly closed his eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "That was your aunt, my daughter. She died 30 years ago." The crying continued overhead. It sounded heartbreakingly real. I felt every instinct urging me to climb into the attic, to help whoever was up there. Henry tightened his grip on my arm. It knows exactly who to become. And tonight, it's testing us. The scratching began once more. This time, something started crawling across the ceiling directly above our heads, following us, waiting, listening, and neither of us dared move. The scratching above the ceiling continued at a slow, deliberate pace. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It circled the room as though it were searching for the weakest spot in the old wooden boards. Henry Carter kept his eyes fixed on the attic hatch. His knuckles had turned white around the grip of the revolver. "Stay behind me," he whispered. I nodded, unable to speak. The farmhouse felt smaller than ever before. The walls groaned under the weight of the storm. The windows rattled. Then everything stopped, the scratching, the wind, the rain. Even the old house seemed to stop breathing. Henry's face went pale. "The second rule," he whispered urgently. I remembered. If every sound outside suddenly stopped, close your eyes. I shut them immediately. Darkness swallowed everything. At first, there was nothing. Then came a faint clicking sound. Click, click, click. It wasn't coming from above anymore. It was inside the room. Slow footsteps followed, bare feet crossing the wooden floor. One step, then another. They stopped directly in front of me. I could feel something standing only inches away. The air became painfully cold. Then I heard my mother's voice. "Noah, I know you're scared. You don't have to listen to him." Her voice trembled with sadness. "He lied to you." He always lies. A warm hand seemed to brush against my cheek. Every muscle in my body screamed to open my eyes, to see her, to make sure she was really there. Instead, I clenched my fists. Henry had warned me, "Don't look." The voice sighed softly. "I waited 14 years. I won't lose you again." The footsteps slowly drifted away. Seconds later, the storm returned all at once. Rain hammered against the roof. Wind roared through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the forest. "You can open them," Henry said quietly. I looked around. The room was empty, but something had changed. The line of salt beneath the front window had been disturbed. A single footprint marked the white crystals. It looked human, except it had 6 long toes. Henry noticed it too. His expression hardened. It crossed the barrier. "That's never happened before." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means..." He hesitated. "It's getting stronger." Before I could respond, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then every lamp in the farmhouse went out. Darkness flooded the room. Only flashes of lightning illuminated the windows. Henry reached beneath the kitchen counter and pulled out an old oil lantern. With trembling hands, he lit the wick. The small flame pushed back the darkness just enough for us to see. "Stay close," he said. "We're leaving the kitchen." "Leaving?" I asked. "I thought this house protected us." "It used to." He glanced toward the broken front door. "Not anymore." Another flash of lightning lit the hallway. For the briefest instant, I thought I saw someone standing at the top of the stairs. When the darkness returned, they were gone. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Henry didn't answer. He had already seen it. We moved slowly into the hallway. Every floorboard creaked beneath our weight. The lantern cast long shadows that danced across the walls. The old family photographs still hung where I remembered. Birthdays, fishing trips, Christmas mornings. I paused in front of one. It showed me as a boy sitting beside Henry on the porch. My mother stood behind us, smiling. Something about the photograph felt wrong. I lifted the lantern closer. My mother's face? It had been scratched away. Not torn, not faded. Scratched away with something sharp. Henry quietly spoke behind me. "I did that. You scratched Mom out of every picture?" "I scratched that thing out." A loud thump echoed upstairs. Then another. Heavy footsteps, walking across the second floor. Not hiding anymore, almost as if it wanted us to hear. Henry looked toward the ceiling. It knows we're leaving. The footsteps stopped. A moment later, a child's laughter drifted down the staircase. High-pitched, playful, completely out of place. I looked up. At the very top step stood a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 8. She wore an old white dress stained with mud. Her long black hair covered most of her face. She held a faded teddy bear against her chest. "Grandpa?" she asked softly. Henry's entire body froze. His eyes filled with tears. "Emily," the girl smiled. "You left me," Henry whispered through clenched teeth. "No, you aren't my daughter." She took one slow step downward. "I was so lonely." Another step. "Why didn't you come for me?" Henry raised the revolver. His hands trembled. "I buried my daughter 30 years ago." The little girl's smile widened. Then, before my eyes, her body stretched. Bones cracked beneath her skin. Her arms grew impossibly long. Her fingers touched the walls on both sides of the staircase. Her head twisted backward with a sickening snap. The teddy bear fell onto the steps. Its button eyes seemed to blink. I stumbled backward in horror. "What is that?" Henry fired. The gunshot exploded through the house. The creature jerked violently. For a split second, the little girl's disguise vanished. Behind it was something made entirely of darkness. No face, no eyes, only shifting blackness with dozens of pale hands reaching from within its body. Then the illusion returned. The child laughed. The bullet had done nothing. "It doesn't need a body," Henry whispered. "It only needs a memory." The creature suddenly lunged, not down the stairs, across the wall. It crawled sideways like a spider, impossibly fast. Henry shoved me toward the back hallway. "Run!" We sprinted through the farmhouse. The lantern swung wildly in my hand. Behind us came the sound of claws scraping wood. The walls shook. Pictures crashed to the floor. Something slammed against the ceiling directly above us. It was following, always just overhead. Henry threw open the back door. Cold rain lashed our faces. Beyond the porch stretched nothing but darkness and endless pine trees. He looked into the forest, then back at me. "There is one place it cannot follow." "Where?" I shouted over the storm. He pointed toward a narrow trail disappearing into the woods. "The old chapel. But we have to reach it. Before midnight, behind us." The creature laughed using my mother's voice. "My sweet Noah, you'll never make it that far." A deep crack echoed through the farmhouse. The ceiling split open above the hallway. Long black fingers reached through the broken boards, searching, grasping, only inches from our heads. Henry grabbed my arm. "Run." Together, we disappeared into the storm, leaving the shattered farmhouse behind us as something impossible crawled out of the darkness to follow.
Subscribe for next part.